Hi everybody, Lydia here with the Build Show, and today we're going to talk about wrapped windows. So I would say the majority of the jobs that we do are not wood cased, they are drywall finished, or drywall cased, I guess maybe you could say that way. It's very common here, people like it, it's modern, it looks good, and it's just kind of what everything's moved to, especially with these big modern builds. So when we're looking at this window is hung for square. So our corner bead is hung for square. We're not hung for bullnose. And I've got my pieces cut here. And then what we do instead of mitering our square bead, just to save time, is we actually tape underneath where those open corners are. So as you can tell, I've got tape on there. So especially working with tape on beads, you need to be careful because they lie so flat. So what we do is we just go ahead and pre-tape it and make sure it's got some backing back there and it's not just a big open gapping hole. And then this way our bead goes over the top and it can look nice. So when we are doing windows, typically I will cut my top piece first and make sure that fits, and then I will cut my two side pieces. And then I'll make sure that these match up, because essentially this is what the window is going to look like when it's done. Obviously we're going to coat, but there's no trim going on any of these pieces here. There will be trim on the bottom, so we do hold our corner bead off just a touch so that they can get the trim on there. So there will be trim here, and then there will also be trim on the bottom. Some windows have no trim. We've done a lot of specialty ones where we're actually doing the entire window in corner bead. So if we were doing that, then they would put drywall then on this sill right here so that we could fully wrap the window. But obviously these are what would be called 3/4 wraps, because we're wrapping 3/4 of the window. So let's go ahead and get this corner bead on. You can absolutely miter too, if you so choose. If you want to go ahead and miter those corners, especially on the straight, to get it to match up. If you're doing bullnose wraps, you have to miter. You can't have them just be straight like that. They do need to come together nicely, like we saw earlier in the bullnose video. Another thing you can do is you can go ahead and put like trim text or straight flex, put L bead in here or tearaway bead, so you can finish up tight to the window. The majority of the time the hangers are super tight. Like as you can tell, they put that board right up against there. So there is no space or reason for us to do anything. And the painters usually come behind and they'll just run a bead of caulk right there. And then we will tape these inside angles too, so then that way those don't crack. So you just put a little piece of tape in there and just tape them like a normal angle. You can do it before you install or after you install, really doesn't matter. I'm gonna go ahead and get my mud on for my tape on bead. Throw it up. I'm going to make sure it's tight. I don't want to have any gapping here. I don't want it to be so tight that it's wrinkling or it's not sitting flat, but I do want to make sure it's nice and tight up into that corner. That stopped dripping. Okay. Now I'm going to take my other piece that I already have cut. And what's nice is if you have a lot of windows that are the same size, you can kind of batch cut for the most part. These guys, sometimes I'll batch cut, but the legs you can get, you know, like 5, 6 sticks that are all the same size, and then just go ahead and bang a bunch of legs out. I'm going to put that on, and then I'm going to make sure, it's really important that these corners line up. Like right now they are not lining up. This one is deeper. So you can kind of adjust and make sure it looks good, because you got to think there's nothing else going on here. This is essentially the trim. So now that we've got our mud on and our bead on, we're just going to go ahead and roll it. Obviously this is specific to this corner bead. Most tape on beads, so you do want to roll. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm squared up with this, and I'm going to push tight. And then this will also sometimes square the bead up. I'm gonna make sure that that's all the way up tight, because what has happened is if you start rolling and you roll it down, it'll pull down and away from the top, and then you're gonna be short. I have a lot of mud on it. It's usually not this messy because we do it with hoppers or attachments. So before I wipe anything down, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna check and make sure these all match up. So as you can tell, this one's a little bit further out. I'm actually just gonna manipulate the corner bead a little bit. There we go. Make sure everything is square and together. And then wipe off all the excess mud. And then I'm gonna do the same thing again here. What I'm looking for when it's lining up is I just wanna make sure that these two corners are matching. So that line is continuous and going from there. And what can happen is, like say, it's like that. So this corner is way too far in, and what happens is you wind up having to float this out and build a whole corner out of mud, or you just leave it like that and it looks like crap because this side is always going to stick out further than that side, and that side's going to be really deep. So we really do try our best to make sure everything lines up nicely and everything looks good, because again, we gotta think this is the finished trim. I mean, there's no wood going on this at all. It's just corner bead and mud. And then as you can see there, our tape behind there, this is kind of creating a nice back. And then, you know, we just want to try and wipe it nice and tight. We'll go ahead and make sure, you know, everything's lying down pretty nice. We're not looking like, if there's any paper sticking up or sticking out, we want to get that lied down and flat, because it just makes the next coats easier. We want to leave it as clean and tidy as possible too. You know, we'll kind of try and clean up the window. We always scrape our windows when we're done at the end of the job, so this will get coated then. And when we coat, we're going to go all the way up tight to the vinyl. And then once we're done with the job, we just kind of take our knife in there and just, the mud just pops right off of the vinyl. I'm going to get the rest of this down here. And then I'm not worried about this bottom too much. You know, obviously I want to make sure it looks nice and everything's lying down. But then when we coat it, you can kind of do a little whoop there and kind of just get rid of that little spot. Then they have their trim on top and then their trim on the bottom there. So that edge really won't be showing because it'll be all trimmed out. But we do want it to look nice. We want to make sure everything looks good. We want to make sure our corners are fitting together. And that's pretty much it. It's super simple. It looks good. People really love this. And then that's how you do your window in corner bead. It'd be called a wrapped window, would be another word for it. Something that's really important too when you're looking at bidding jobs, make sure you figure out if they're going to do wrapped windows or if they're going to be doing trimmed or cased windows. If they're doing wrapped, make sure you add extra time on and extra money, because essentially you are being the trim carpenter for the windows. Like, just don't eat it. You need to, you know, price accordingly for the extra time it takes into doing this, because some of these houses you get into, you've got, you know, 20, 30 windows. That's a lot of time, a lot of material. So make sure you're keeping that in mind when you are pricing. And if you're a contractor and you're doing wrapped windows, don't be surprised if there's a price increase or an extra charge per stick or per window for this, because it does take extra time, extra coating, extra everything. So price accordingly with that. Anyway, that's it for me this week. You can catch me on all the socials, and I will catch you guys next week with a brand new video. Thanks, guys.